we mentioned that one of our young friends had stomach cancer and that we were praying for him. Sadly, we received the news of his passing away this morning. He is due to be buried this afternoon. He was a man of my age and leaves behind him a wife and a brother and a sister and parents. For him and for all of our marhumeen, if we can begin with a Surah Al-Fatiha. For the love of Ali al-Akbar, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ثم جعلناك على شريعة من الأمر فاتبعها ولا تتبع أهواء الذين لا يعلمون إنهم لن يغنوا عنك من الله شيئا وإن الظالمين بعضهم أولياء بعض والله ولي المتقين هذا بصائر للناس وهدى ورحمة لقوم يوقنون آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد Awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our 9th part in our series looking at Islam in Britain and Islam in the forthcoming decade. Yesterday, we touched on a very important but also sensitive topic, which was about the realization of the opportunities that religion and Islam in particular wants to be able to create to remove oppression and injustice in the social order, particular when it comes to women, which is half of our human civilization. And it tells us that if we get that right, if we're able to really think through that question and make Islam as a genuine resort, a place of comfort and a place of a desired destination for half of the planet, it tells us how far Islam can go very, very quickly. And therefore, as much of the conversation was a strong conversation, and sometimes some things need to be put out there for us to be able to shake ourselves, it tells us it can't be the end of the conversation. That it needs to be the beginning of that conversation. Not to say that we're not already having that, but that it needs to be more than just a one-off majlis. If we're going to talk about a space where half of the planet feels like a belief system is something that they can find is going to be productive for their lifetime, just as the way in which we as men would want to have that conversation for ourselves to understand our own role and the way in which Islam would assist us in the development of our own selves, we also need to have that very same discussion for women. Now, yesterday we concluded with a proposal of a particular reading of that famous verse of bring 2 female witnesses in the absence of 1 male witness. And we accepted that the traditional understanding is that because of the emotion and the soft-hearted nature of a woman, she is very much inclined towards that nature. And as a result, it can impact the way in which one thinks, the way in which one navigates through any circumstance. But we asked, is that any less true of a man and his own nature? Is it not the case that a man is very susceptible to other things? Be it, for example, the opposite gender? Is it not the case that a man is very susceptible to power? Is it not the case that man is very susceptible to? So if that is the case, why isn't it that if a man is also susceptible to certain weaknesses, why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't provide a concurrent verse to say that if the man errs in his testimony because of his own weakness, why isn't it the case that Allah recommends another witness to go and assist the man? Wouldn't that be an equitable solution if the opposite case is the case? And then we said it's very possible for us to look at this verse not through the traditional lens of fiqh, and whether we have two people sighting the moon or one man sighting the moon and two women. This is a very fiqhi understanding. We are talking about sociology. We are talking about the society of Britain. And we suggested that the reason why the verse tells us this from the sociological lens is that because women had been so disenfranchised for such a long period of time, had a inferiority complex put in them for such a long period of time, that although that had changed through the laws of Islam, socially they still brought with them those complexities, those weaknesses. And so if they walked into a courtroom and faced a judge, it might be that a woman might forget her testimony, might feel fear of her testimony, might not have confidence in her testimony. And if she errs, get a second person to come and assist her. There's no shame in that. We have it today. If anyone has gone to court, or anyone has been part of a jury selection, or anyone knows some of their own experiences, today even, if there is a witness who fears for their own life, sometimes they can give a witness behind a closed door. Sometimes they can give a witnessing with an altered voice, right? To protect their integrity, to protect their safety. The judge makes sure this is the witness, and they're allowed to give it behind a screen. Why? Because a person, if they're standing in front of their accuser, or if a person is standing in front of a person who may have some sort of ability to hurt them, after they give their testimony, it may be that the witness fears and recants or changes their position out of the weakness in them. If we understand that even in law today, we have abilities to help those witnesses, do you not imagine that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu would also help women witnesses 1400 years ago when the social order was so different to what it is today? If we understand this and we take the asl, if we take this as a qa'idah, if we take this as a principle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us when a woman is disenfranchised, when a woman through her own weaknesses as a human being, like men have their own weaknesses, if there is a means to help them achieve, then we have to be able to help them fully in that accomplishment. If we take that as an asl, it tells us that wherever the social circumstance, wherever the situation that a woman needs assistance socially, Islam would have provided that for her. Whether it's in the courtroom, whether it's in the familial setting, whether it's in the university, or whether it's even in the realm of business and politics. Wherever there is a place where there is not equity and justice, and a person needs a help up, we give them that help. We do it across the world until today. We used to have underrepresentation of blacks, brown, women in the police force, in the workforce. So what did we come out with? We actually in the workforce assisted, didn't we? We said that we should have representation that is equal to society's representation. If we understand that this is always the case in a mature civilization, you can imagine how the Prophet and the Quran tried to help half a community that had been disenfranchised from any rights and how to bring them up over a period of time. This is what Islam would offer to women today in the world, and this is something that we can think about applying if we wanted to make a genuine change in society. Today, we move on to our 9th topic, and this topic is a topic that's spoken about over and over and over again. But I hope to be able to provide something very different. And in fact, I'm almost going to go against the grain. The title of our discussion tonight is to think about and intra-faith discussion, but away from dialogue and away from the idea of just bringing people inside the Husayniyah, inside the masjid, to have a conference for 45 minutes where the priest, the rabbi, and the Maulana speak about the same topic, everybody shakes hands, walks away, and nobody else keeps in touch afterwards. Which is the typical model that we have. So I want to move away from the typical model. I'm not saying it doesn't have benefit, it does. But it's a very limited benefit. And it's clearly not a model that we're adopting seriously enough to have any change, either within our own communities or the wider society. Therefore, we need to think again at the level of the master narrative, which helps us to understand what are the overriding assumptions that go into our inter and intra-faith dialogues, and then to break those altogether, to say that they are not workable, that they are wrong in the first place, because clearly they're not yielding any productivity. That's the evidence, that if they were working, they would be working. The fact that they're not working, let's do away with these assumptions. Let's return back to the Quran, and let's go back to the understanding of what's happening in the waqi', in the reality on the ground, and then let's rebuild the way in which we understand our inter and intra-faith dialogue. Now, just in case anyone doesn't know these terms, because we have a lot of youth amongst us, what do we mean by inter-faith dialogue? Between different faiths. Ahsantum. Mathalan, Islam and Christianity, Islam and Hinduism, and so on and so forth. What do we mean by intra-faith? Between the same faith, sects that can sit together from amongst the same faith. For example, Shia and Sunni. For example, Shia and Sufi. For example, Shia and Wahhabi. And so on and so forth. Now, what I wish to be able to do tonight is, as I said, present to you the master narratives. And again, I plan to shock you, plan to really show you things that you may not have considered. You don't have to agree, you can disagree, you can push back, we can debate. I want to learn with you. But if I came here and showed you the same things that you already know, I would be doing a disservice to the pulpit of Aba Abdullah alayhi salam. So I'm going to show you certain master narratives, and then we're going to think about things very differently. And the idea is to demonstrate where master narratives come from. The way in which we think, the way in which we practice has been given to us. We inherit a certain way of thinking. Let us challenge whether those master narratives are correct, where they come from, and how actually we can think about inter and intra-faith dialogue from a completely different perspective. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us everything we need within the Quran. He gives us the principles of everything we need from the Quran. If there is a question that you and I have, and we can't find it in the Quran, it's because either we don't know the Quran well enough, or we haven't been looking. Maybe we haven't been looking at all. But if you see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the sifat, the qualities, the characteristics of the Pharaoh, you will understand that the Pharaoh as an individual or the Pharaoh as a system has certain characteristics that they will apply onto people. We should be a society that is very much united, that loves each other, that unites with each other. However, the Pharaonic system is to divide one another. You know, often we ask ourselves, how do I know the qualities of Dajjal? How do I know the Dajjali system? Go back to the Quran and understand that the Pharaoh has certain ways. And if you're able to see these ways and these practices, you can then say that's a Pharaonic system. And if you see its opposite, you can then say it's a prophetic system. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran, and I'm going to focus on one, and then we'll go into it to appreciate how this actually manifests itself in the real world. Now in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in chapter number 28 of the Quran, Surah Al-Qasas, the story of Pharaoh. He mentions it at the beginning. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Tasin Mim. تلك آيات الكتاب المبين نتلو عليك من نبأ موسى وفرعون بالحق لقوم يؤمنون. So we shall relate to you from the story of Musa and Fir'aun in truth. This is going to be with truth. I'm going to tell you the story in a way in which there is no falsity, no corruption, such that if you were to understand it, you would gain from this, because it is haqq. To whom? لِقَوْمٍ يُؤْمِنُونَ. To a community who believes. إِنَّ فِرْعَوْنَ عَلَى فِي الْأَرْضِ وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا يَسْتَضْعِفُ طَائِفَةً مِّنْهُمْ يُذَبِّحُ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيِي نِسَاءَهُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ Mufsideen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the following: that Pharaoh made himself empowered, emboldened on the land. He took himself as being God on land. As you know, he states, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى إِنَّ فِرْعَوْنَ عَلَى فِي الْأَرْضِ. He places himself over the land. He puts himself in authority over the land. Now, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to describe what does Pharaoh do. If you want to know what a pharaonic system does, this is the qualities and the features of it. وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا. That he places in it and he makes in it its people to be Shi'a. And here it doesn't mean Shi'a as in like Shi'a of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. It means divided groups, partisans of different groups. This is important. If you see a government, if you see an individual dividing people, know that this is not from the religion of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. No matter who it is. When I say divide, I don't mean, I'm Shia, you're Sunni. No, I mean dividing, causing division amongst people. Then that's not in line with prophethood, which is to bring people together. If you see a person or a government or a system dividing and making people against each other, then this is from a pharaonic system. وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا يَسْتَضْعِفُ طَائِفَةً مِّنْهُمْ. And he weakened, he made downtrodden group from amongst them. Now imagine this. If I divide you into 5 parts, 5 groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I make you, this group, weaker than the rest, what happens? If I make you weaker, I kill some of yours, or I make you economically weaker, or I disenfranchise you from education, over a period of time, this is going to have a number of psychological effects, isn't it? For example, it's going to make you dislike the others that I am favoring. It's going to make this group think that they are superior to this one because they are getting the favor of the Pharaoh, whereas this group isn't. And you can take that to its nth degree. So eventually, not only am I creating division, but I'm fostering amongst yourselves fights. And because I'm favoring one, it is obvious that you won't like me, and so I can't like you, which means I have to side with you, I have to weaponize you, be it literally with weapons, or be it with media, or be it with money, or be it, and I need to downtrod you. This is what happens in a pharaonic system. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it in this verse as well, in the very same chapter a little later on. Allah mentions, Inna Fir'auna wa Hamana wa janudahuma kanu khati'in. Pharaoh and Haman, and both of them had two armies. Wa janudahuma kanu khati'in. They were amongst the wrongdoers, amongst the sinners. Tell me something. Does anyone know the tafsir of that verse? That they had two armies. Both Pharaoh and Haman had two sets of armies. The first army was what? Literally their army. Yeah? Like in our context, we would say tanks, planes, things like that. Their army was what? They had a physical army. They had horsemen, they had swords, they had spears. What was the second army? The media machine that they had. The means to be able to propagandize. Against whom? Musa alayhi salam. Against Banu Israel. So when it says يَسْتَضْعِفُ طَائِفَةً مِّنْهُمْ, that he used to weaken a group from amongst them, it doesn't just mean weaken, it means all the resources were there to downtrod one group, elevate other groups. What else did it do? يُذَبِّحُ أَبْنَاءَهُمْ. So from amongst those who were weakened, they began to also slaughter their children as well, which would of course cut off the ability to reproduce a strong next generation. وَيَسْتَحْيِي نِسَاءَهُمْ إِنَّهُ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُفْسِدِينَ. So the focal point here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the pharaonic description, that their qualities are that they divide people amongst themselves, that they weaken certain groups in order to privilege others. Now, I want to be able to show you a very important book, and I really recommend this book, especially to to everyone, but to my Khoja, Indian, Pakistani brothers in the crowd, and anyone who's watching at home. Read this book. It's a really important history of India and the British Empire in India, and then the partition and what happened with the partition. Of course, there are people here who would have lived through the partition. We can ask them for first-hand stories. But also, this book has a really beautiful understanding of the history of this event. Now, the scholar's name is Shashi Tharoor, and I don't know how many of you know him, but this is an eminent scholar. I'm not saying I agree with everything he says. I'm just saying as a work of history, it's a very important book. Now, Shashi actually came to London to debate. And he was having a debate, I think it was Oxford Union, and he actually was debating on the question, should the British Empire pay reparations to India? He argued yes. Do you know how much he asked for? Does anyone know how much he said? Look, yes, I'm going to argue, they should pay reparations. How much should they pay? How much should Britain pay for all the damage it's done? India, at the time, before the British Empire came in and devastated it, was the single largest economy in the world. According to some scholars, it was above 20% of global GDP. By the time Britain ended up finishing with raping it, it was like 3% of GDP. So how much should you pay in reparations for 2 centuries of rape, theft and murder? You know what he said? £1. You know why? Because if you were to actually pay us back in how much you owe us financially, you wouldn't be able to. Yeah? British intake, taxes, is how much per annum? 700 billion per annum in taxes. You would have to pay tens of trillions in reparations. It would bankrupt Britain. So he said, look, it's not possible to ask for financial return, but just give us a genuine apology of what you've done. Give us something symbolic of £1. Now, of course, after this great debate, they brought this to David Cameron, said, look, this has been a real eye-opener to people. Will you apologize? Will you pay back £1? 1 measly pound to the British, from the British coffers, such that you can apologize to India for what you've done? I think you know the answer. So now, after this great debate, they asked him, come write a book. So he wrote a book, right? An Era of Darkness, the British Empire in India. And as I said, I can't recommend this book highly enough. Now, in my reading of this, I came across something really interesting. And he has a whole chapter on divide and conquer, Allah yarhamak. He has a whole chapter on divide and conquer. What did we say the Pharaoh's quality was from the Quran? Division, right? وَجَعَلَهَا Shia. He makes them into groups. Now I'm only going to read certain passages, but it's very important that you understand how certain master narratives are created about Christians and Muslims, Muslims and Hindus, Shia and Sunni. And therefore, when you inherit these roles and ways of thinking, ask yourself, how much of them are your own genuine beliefs? And how much of them are created by the master narratives of people who have told you how you need to think about people? So what he mentions in this book is that the British, actually when they came in order to create division amongst peoples, they created, one of the ways, they created a census. What's a census? Collating information. The idea is to find out who believes what, who represents what, so that we can have specific statistics on numbers of different peoples. But the way in which they used to have census in Britain was very different to the way in which they created a census for India. Why? Because they wanted to create division where there wasn't division. And sadly, we all ate it up. Like good slaves. Yes, master. I'm going to read to you what he says. And I'm going to show you specifically the extent of the divisions that they made upon us, the Muslim community. This is page 128. Census taking in British India differed significantly from the conduct of the census in Britain, since unlike in the home country, the census in India was led by British anthropologists seeking to atomize Indian society, the better to control and govern it. As I have mentioned earlier, Indians in pre-colonial times lived in imprecisely fuzzy communities. What does that mean, fuzzy communities? Mixed. Imprecisely fuzzy communities with overlapping cultural practices, minimal self-awareness, and non-existent consciousness of the details of their differences from other communities, except in the most general terms. Clear picture, yes? Everyone's understanding. This is underscored by the scholar Sudipta Kaviraj, who observes that pre-colonial communities had imprecise fuzzy boundaries because some collective identities were not territorially based, and because part of this fuzziness of social mapping would arise because traditional communities, unlike modern ones, are not enumerated. They didn't base their divisions on how many numbers of Shia, Jains, Christians, this sect, that sect. They didn't think about themselves as saying, I have 1,000 people here, I have 2,000 people there. They just worked together collectively. I've had the honor of reciting twice in Mumbai for the Ashra of Muharram. And I tell you, on one night, you will see the Shia, the Hindus, and the Christians all take out their processions on one day. And they will work together and help each other in ensuring that each is safe and given time to represent their own communities. He continues. The British simply superimposed their assumptions onto Indian reality, classifying people by religion, caste, or tribe on the basis of imprecise answers to the census commissioner's questions. So this is the first stage of what happened. Now I'm skipping a few pages, and I want you to know exactly what happened to the Muslim community, and I want you to realize how they divided us and the effect of those divisions until today. Page 143. Such divisions were heightened, not just between religious communities, but even between religious communities. Thus, the British can be largely blamed for the creation of previously non-existent Shia-Sunni tensions within the Muslim population of Lucknow. Prior to the British annexation of Awadh, the two sects lived in harmony under a Shia Nawab, whose celebrations of the Shia festivals of Muharram had included Sunnis and Hindus, as well in a public affirmation of his people's fraternity. Muharram collectively was participated in by Shia and by Sunnis and by Hindus. Do you understand? Sunnis used to come and participate in the gathering with Shia. Once the British had deposed the Nawab in 1856, the unifying symbol of his throne was lost, and the relationship between the ruling Shia nobility and the non-Shia subjects of the kingdom, yani Sunnis and Hindus, irrevocably transformed. The exaggeration by the British of communal identities now embraced sectarian differences between the two Muslim sects. As the scholar Keith, I don't know how to pronounce that surname, recounts, by 1905, religious rhetoric. What's rhetoric? You know, the arguments that scholars and Maulanas and Dhakirin bring to the pulpit against this person and that person. By 1905, religious rhetoric between Shia and Sunnah had reached such heights that Sunnis in Lucknow no longer joined the Marthiya elegies during Muharram, but instead recited in praise of the first three caliphs, which they called Madhab as-Sahaba. So in the space of 50 years, it went from the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the Hindus and the Shia participating in Muharram together to being separated, and now the Sunnis in opposition would now do elegies in praise of the Khulafa. Shias responded. How do you think the Shias responded?
Praising.
Not praising. By increasing their tabarra. It's amazing how easily we are manipulated. Doesn't matter what the Quran says, doesn't matter what Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam did. British come in, tell you how to think, we do it. Shia leaders responded with tabarra, curses upon the Sahaba. Shia leaders also managed to persuade the British government that Sunni practices during Muharram were largely irrelevant. So the British enacted strict laws against practices by the Sunnis that could have been offensive to the Shia. Before long, the British had decided to authorize separate Shia and separate Sunni processions to commemorate Muharram. I don't know what to tell you. I think by now you probably are as aggrieved and saddened as I am. Any individual that divides you, be it Christian and Muslim, Muslim and Jew, or amongst Muslims, they are enacting the pharaonic policy. I don't care how big his turban is. The Quran tells us the pharaonic qualities. Look at the difference between this ideology and the example that's given to us by the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. In the event of Mubahala, the Christians of Najran, they actually came with their drums and bells. They actually came with their religious garments and paraphernalia. You know what they used to wear? Those giant crosses. They walked into the masjid of the Prophet, playing their bells, ringing their bells, playing their drums. Yes, the Prophet disapproved. This wasn't his religion. But he allowed them to do it even in the masjid of the Prophet. One of the famous companions, who later happened to end up becoming the second caliph of Islam, the narration says, he actually went to the Prophet and said, look at the beauty on these people's dresses. Look how shiny and rich these garments are from these priests of Christianity. Why are you, Ya Rasulullah, dressing so simplistically? Why don't you dress the way these people dress? The Prophet didn't even bother responding to him and just turned his face away. You have a choice of how you wish to think. You have a choice of which way you want to follow. The Quran even tells us, O Ahl al-Kitab, let us come together for a common word, that we may worship Allah, none other than Allah. Come together to worship. Let us recite our supplications together, worship together, none other than Allah. Our sixth Imam Jaffer Ladak, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, and also our 11th Imam Hasan al-Askari, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi, have a united tradition. It's mentioned from both of them, slightly differently, but it's mentioned from both of them. And this hadith is considered to be so sound that as you enter into actually the haram of Imam al-Askari, salamullahi alayhi, in Samarra, this tradition is mentioned there. It's actually written as you enter. This hadith is called the Wasiyya of al-Askari alayhi salam li shi'atihi. His advice. Now this isn't an advice from an early Imam. This is an advice from the last apparent Imam, before the next Imam goes into a lengthy ghaiba. So he's giving you an advice before now the Imam is inaccessible. You know what he says? Sallu fi asha'irihim. Pray with them. Who is them? Who is them? Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Pray with them. Sallu fi asha'irihim. Pray amongst their folk. Visit their ill folk. Participate in their janazas. And return their huquq back to them. For if you were to do this, you would end up being known as the Shia of Al-Askari, and this would please me greatly. If you don't like the hadith and you don't agree with it, don't blame me. Go and complain to As-Sadiq alayhi salam. Go and complain that you don't like it to Al-Askari alayhi salam. I remember once in India, in Mumbai, we gave a whole lecture on unity, and we gave ayah after ayah after ayah after hadith after hadith. It must have been about 30 of them. I literally brought with me Al-Kafi, and I literally read from Al-Kafi, so that there was no potential. I brought with me Nahj al-Balagha, so there was no disparity. I read word for word, the Arabic and then the English, the Arabic and the English. They became so angry with me, some of them. The lecture had to be taken down from the internet. Now I imagine you're a little bit more tolerant of me than maybe some of my brethren were there. But I tell you, where are your narratives coming from? Where are your master ideas coming from? From the Quran? And from Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam? Or from Maulana X and Maulana Y? Because you grew up hearing this and you grew up hearing that. And I'm not saying don't listen to Maulana, because then you wouldn't be listening to me. I just mean go back to the Quran. Go back to the Ahadith. Read them. Have a flavor of them. Understand what Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is telling us. So India was divided so arbitrarily by the British, generally and specifically, such that it affected us until today. And I tell you what, I mentioned this in the Q&A on a previous night, I tell you what, in Milton Keynes, when I say I came from Milton Keynes, I'm not telling you something, again, I'm not telling you I'm from, a city that's 1 million miles away. We're talking 3-4 hours drive. So the broader issues are there. In my own city, our brothers from the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, may Allah bless them, have started doing Ashura Day programs. They've started recounting the maqtal of Aba Abdullah alayhi salam, and their story is identical to ours. The theology may be different, the story is the same. And I know other shuyukh in Liverpool do it, I know other shuyukh from around the country do it. My point is there's a space to get back together again, isn't there? If we identify, if we prove it was India and our cultures that were divided by the British, then we have no longer any need to be divided in the way in which it is. We can come together to recite the Maqtal. We can unite the two groups and have a joint majlis together. Instead of having Urdu in English, Arabic in English, let us have a scholar from the Sunni community come and talk, and a scholar from the Shia community come and talk. Get the communities together for 10 nights, give 30 minutes to one, and an hour and 15 to the other. I know this is going out live. It's a joke because I often go over my time. I know the community is very patient with me. So what I mean is, I'm just joking about my time. Give the two great scholars equal time. Have them in the same hall. Let them cry together over Husayn ibn Ali. And then, let us go on ziyarah of Arba'iniyah together. Let's defeat the Pharaoh. Let's go back to the Quran. Let's go back to Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. Can you imagine us from this country going to visit Abu Abdullah alayhi salam together, Amir al-Mu'mineen together, Qadimiyya together, Samarat together? It starts here. Now, having understood that these are some of the challenges that exist by virtue of the master narratives that have been created for you and I now wish to be able to show you some of the other master narratives that are being created between Muslims and Christians. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some books, and I'm going to show you a video which is 8 minutes long. So I recommend, if you want now to be able to see the video, you can't see it there, right? Yeah. I know some of you are against the wall, you're comfortable, you can listen to it, but if you want to see the video, you can just come and scoot over to be able to see it. Now, Sayyid, if you kindly show us the first slide. The first slide should be a book which is called Worlds at War. Can you see that? Yeah? Now the master narrative is that there is an East and a West, and for 2,500 years they have been at war with each other. The East is Islam, and the West is Christianity. And there has been a struggle between them. Now, of course, Islam is only 1,400 years old, so it talks about other struggles that have existed prior. But in this idea that there is a Manichaean war between two civilizations, they're primarily speaking today of Muslim versus Christianity. And you're told this, aren't you? Islam is incompatible with the West. Islam is incompatible with the Judeo-Christian civilization. Do you remember I talked to you about that and said that that's only come post-1945? But there is a re-emphasis on this idea. You've probably heard as well of the book, The Clash of Civilizations by Samuel P. Huntington. All of these books try to reaffirm this idea. Although we may be aware of this idea, it may be that we don't realize the extent of how dangerous this idea is and actually what they're pushing. So I want to show you now a scholar. When I say scholar, I mean like a pseudo scholar. I want to show you a Western writer by the name of Joel Rosenberg. If you can go to the next slide and show his book. He has a book which is called The 12th Imam, a Novel. Rosenberg is an evangelical Christian that believes that Al-Mahdi, salamullahi alayhi, is the Antichrist. So, when Jesus returns for the Christians, he's going to fight the Antichrist. So who's the Antichrist to them? Mahdi, our Al-Mahdi. And they believe that Gog and Magog, remember we also have Yahjuj and Mahjuj, ahsantum. They believe Gog and Magog is Russia and Iran. And they believe that Iran is trying to get nuclear weapons so that it can pass it to Al-Mahdi so it can destroy Christian civilization. Now he has written books on this, and he goes on to international TV talking about it. And he spreads amongst the Christian evangelicals from the Bible this belief. Now, I've gone into a whole lecture. If you want to find it on YouTube, you can find it, where I've spoken about the biblical texts proving this belief system. I'm not talking to you now about the text. I'm talking to you about master narratives, what people are told to believe, and how we need to change these ideas. Master narratives, the way in which you think about your interfaith and intra-faith dialogue, and how we actually need to reform this idea altogether. I'm going to show you a 7-8 minute clip of him going on to a TV show on Fox News, and I want you to understand the extent of what Christians and Jews are told about Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, about Ayatollah Khamenei, about Shia Ithna Ashari, which means you and I. I want you to know what people say about us on international TV. So when you think about the challenges that exist in our society, what's happening to Christians, what they're being told, the radicalization about Shia Muslims, you understand what's happening in your own civilization. Fadl. Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Sayyid. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
I want to talk to you about something that nobody seems to ever notice when they talk about Iran. When we're talking about Iran, we're talking about people, the leaders that are called, they're called Twelvers. They believe in the 12th Imam, the Mahdi. This is one spooky dude. Twelvers are so dangerous that the Ayatollah Khomeini at one point banned them. Said we gotta kill them all because they're too crazy. The Ayatollah Khomeini said that. Now,
the Ayatollah Khomeini apparently said that 12ers are too crazy and he has to ban them. Now, I could be wrong, but I always thought Imam al-Khomeini alayhi rahmah was Ithna Ashari. But apparently, he found the Ithna Ashariya too crazy and he had to ban them. Carry on.
Everybody has been talking about how Iran launched its most advanced missiles earlier this week, but here's what you should be paying attention to. Iran's President Ahmadinejad, he says this at the end of all of his major speeches, including last Wednesday at the UN. He said this.
Praise be to Allah, the Lord of the universe, and peace and blessing be upon our Master and Prophet Muhammad and his pure household and his noble companions. O God, hasten the arrival of Imam al-Mahdi and grant him good health and victory, and make us his followers and those who attest to his rightfulness.
Okay, hasten the return of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi. That's not a good idea. Joel Rosenberg, the producer of Inside the Revolution documentary film based on the best-selling book of the same name. Joel, it's not a good idea to hasten the return of the Promised One, because the Promised One only comes after the world is washed in blood, right?
That's right. As I described in the documentary film and in the book, Inside the Revolution, this is a serious theological argument made by Shia Muslims, not all of them,
yes,
but certainly by Ahmadinejad, that you need to create chaos, carnage, and even genocide, into which the Islamic Messiah comes and establishes.
So the argument is, we the Shia believe, or at least some of us, that we have to create genocide in order for Mahdi to come. We often have this trope, don't we? We need really bad times before Mahdi comes. Everyone says it, right? But they don't understand it's far more complex than this, right? And as a precursor, are we supposed to create the mess? What happened to our Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar? So are we supposed to create the mess or solve the mess? Solve the mess. But according to this belief, we have to create genocide. Now, which bomb manages to create genocide the most? A nuclear bomb. So who needs to drop nuclear bombs before Mahdi comes? Shia. Which country is Shia that Ahmadinejad represents? Iran. So why are Iran trying to get a bomb apparently? So that we can hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi. Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajah, in the truest sense.
Justice and peace.
So if I can explain this, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I can explain this, if you're a Christian and you believe in the end times, you know, the tribulation, it's going to suck beyond belief for a long time. And then Jesus comes, it would be like a Christian saying, hey, let's just really make it suck really hard right now, because then Jesus will come. Not a good idea, but that's what the Mahdi, that's what Ahmadinejad believes. Hasten the return. Let's just make it as bloody as we can. So when he says, oh, Israel, you're going to be vaporized, he believes that he is going to be fulfilling prophecy, and it's going to be good for the Islamic world if he does that, right?
That's right. In Ahmadinejad's twisted world, he believes essentially he's the John the Baptist for the coming of the Messiah. But you're right, in this case, to bring the Messiah requires launching genocidal wars against the Judeo-Christian world,
right,
to destroy the Judeo-Christian world. And this is why he's using the word annihilate. He's saying annihilate the United States and Israel.
Okay. The Twelvers believe that, and you hear this all the time, that the United States is the Antichrist, and the little Antichrist is Israel. That's because we believe the Antichrist is a person. They believe the Antichrist is a force, right?
Many Muslims do. There's some division on that.
I'm talking specifically about the Twelvers.
The great Satan.
Right, I'm just talking specifically about the Twelvers. Okay.
The great Satan.
Okay, so the Mahdi, when he comes crawling out of the well, he is supposed to create a global government. He persecutes the Christians, and he has them either submit or he cuts their heads off, right?
Right.
Okay, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, in fact, and what's more, the Islamic Messiah...
It's worth saying to anyone that's listening to this, no, Shias and Muslims do not believe in making Christians submit. There is freedom of religion. We don't believe in cutting people's heads off. So whatever Joel Rosenberg is saying is a lie about our belief system. Which I know you know it, just in case anyone's listening.
To come with Jesus. Jesus
Right.
is the deputy, the lieutenant, and forces people to convert or die.
Well, yeah, he'll testify to the Mahdi, and he'll say, hey, by the way, you guys misunderstood. I'm not the Son of God. This is the man right here.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
Okay. They seem to me to be a lot like end times prophecy: war, rumors of war, signs of natural wonders, etc., etc. It seems like the same thing that plays out in the book of Revelations. Are they connected at all, at least in the minds of the Twelvers?
It's a mirror image, so there's a lot of similarities, to be sure. But of course, the difference is that Jesus said in Matthew chapter 24, verse 14, that this good news, that God loves you and will accept you and forgive you and save you, this good news must be preached to the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end shall come. So followers of Jesus Christ think they're supposed to bring good news and peace.
So Christians, mashallah, they spread the good news, the peace, the forgiveness, whilst the radical Twelvers who are waiting on Mahdi, they have to spread a bomb in order to bring about the end times. Christians have to spread good news and peace to bring about the end times. We spread bombs to bring about the end times. That's what he said.
Through the cross before Jesus comes.
Right.
But the Twelvers believe you bring death, destruction, and horror, and then the end shall come.
So, the Ayatollah Khomeini in the Revolution of '79, he said these Twelvers are too crazy for even him. What happened? Because is Ahmadinejad the only one? Are there a lot of them? It's my understanding that the government now is full of these people. Is that true?
That's right. Well, the Ayatollah Khamenei, the current supreme leader, was a disciple of the Ayatollah Khomeini.
Okay.
Apparently, it's turned out that he has been a secret closet Twelver because he clearly believes the same things as Ahmadinejad.
Secret Twelver.
Why do we know this?
Who knew?
There's been a lot of statements by Khamenei,
Shocked.
but the key is this rigged election.
Yeah.
Khamenei could have gotten rid of Ahmadinejad if he wanted to. He has pulled him back on several key issues over the years, but on this issue, end times theology, he has given him free reign.
Okay.
Just in case anyone also needs clarification, Ayatollah Sistani is also a Twelver. Shock horror.
Now a new term.
All right, so and I want to make this clear. I'm not saying that these things are true. What I'm saying is our government, they only seem to take the violence from these crazy Christian, and people at tea parties, they take that deadly serious, but they don't think that people like Ahmadinejad believe in this stuff. It's important, if you're even going to negotiate it, that maybe they're bluffing, maybe they don't. But it's important that you understand this, and I don't think our government, I don't think Bush understood it, and I don't think Barack Obama understands it. Agree or disagree?
I agree with that, and that's the problem, is that Ahmadinejad, in that UN speech last week, was more explicit about his end times theology than any other time in the last 5 years that he's been giving.
What did he
these
say?
speeches.
What did he say?
He actually gave several paragraphs of describing something called Entazar. That's a Shia Islamic eschatology notion of...
What does intizar mean? Waiting. So now, how does he say, what does he say about you, Afdal al-a'mal, intidara, faraj. The best of a'mal, so amal here is an act, it's not passive, it's active. The best of a'mal is awaiting the faraj of the imam. We all know this. What does our friend say about this?
having the patience to wait for the coming of the Messiah. And he went on at length on this. Moreover, on an NBC News interview on Sunday, Ann Curry did, it was broadcast on an alternate network, but she actually asked him, Ahmadinejad, about this, and he said that he's in direct communication with this Islamic Messiah.
No, he didn't.
That's the first time that I've heard in these last 5 years him go on the record, in this case with an American reporter, though NBC did not actually report the story, but they did broadcast it. But to say that he's in direct communication with this mystical Islamic Messiah, that's why this is important.
Okay.
Islamic eschatology, end times theology, is driving Iranian foreign policy, and the White House, members of Congress, certainly the UN, are not paying attention to this.
There's more. I want to make sure we finish in time. But if you want to watch it, you can just YouTube Joel Rosenberg, and you will find more than enough of this great stuff for you to learn from. Now, first and foremost, hands up, how many people knew? Okay, let me rephrase this before I ask you that question. This is on Fox News. Fox News is powerful enough to get Donald Trump elected. A man that actually would boast about his sexual abuse of women, and still 30% of American women voted for him. Is this, okay, seems to be a little bit of feedback now. We just need to turn this down slightly. Thank you. Yeah, a bit better? This is a man that is openly racist, and blacks still voted for him. Right? Fox News is powerful enough to get that man, that narcissist, megalomaniac, elected to being the President of the United States of America. Clearly it has some power, yes? Yes? That's what's being spread on Fox News about Shias and about the awaited Savior. Mine and your Imam. My question to you is, be honest. Before I played this video to you, how many people knew that this is how many evangelical Christians speak about Shiism and what they believe Shiism is about? How many? Yeah, we have maybe 2 people's hands up in the entire audience. It's not bad. You're not. That's why I said to you, I'm showing you master narratives. You may not know this stuff. Like the other day we talked about ta'leef. You may not know what's happening in your own cities, about the extent of the poverty in other parts of this very same city. We may not realize how certain Christians are being fed about Shiism and Iran and Al-Mahdi and our Maraji al-Kiram. May Allah bless them all, protect them, grant them long lives. That's what's being spoken about us on the channel that got Donald Trump elected. Can you imagine what's being spread on other channels? Those other websites? White supremacists? Remember we said that they have these ideas, these beliefs, they're spreading things? There is so much ignorance, fear, and hatred and lies that are spread. And these are becoming the meta and the master narratives about us. We in Britain are always several years behind what happens in the United States of America. Always. But if that's happening there, it's not long until that reaches here. We have a chance, before that becomes rampant, before that becomes norm, to actually create a genuine relationship with the churches and with the synagogues, such that they understand our belief systems and how beautiful they are. There are certain hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Man aslaha al-azdada balagha al-murad. One who reforms his adversaries. One who reforms, changes his adversaries, attains his goal. Another one from the Imam alayhi salam, he says, مجاملة أعداء الله في دولتهم تقية من عذاب الله وحذر من معارك البلاء في الدنيا. Acting courteously with the antagonizers of God in their own domains, in their own lands, in their own places of worship, is a safeguard from the chastisement of Allah and a caution from the raging tribulations of the world. Meaning, go into their houses. I say houses, I mean literally houses. Go into their places, go into the land, go into their places of worship. Create a relationship. Act courteously with them. It is a means of caution from the raging tribulations of this world. SubhanAllah. Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam have told us the principles. But many of us want to take the master narrative of the British, that we just do cursing and we just do abuse and we just separate from one another. Look at the difference, look at the difference. Now I'm going to show you one last slide. And this one is very interesting because it begins to help us think that there is a shift in the master narrative that is available for you and I. And I mentioned this scholar to you yesterday by the name of Dr. Bullitt. And Dr. Bullitt, Richard Bullitt, is from the United States of America. And he's written a new book, which again, I recommend everyone to read, because if we really want to be able to understand how we can shift the master narrative, I argue that this book is one of the most powerful books that you can have to arm you with the knowledge to shift the master narrative when you talk to people. As I showed you earlier, we have the types of books that says West versus East, Islam versus Christianity. That's the master narrative that's put up. And now the new master narrative is West versus Shi'ism, West versus Al-Mahdi. He writes a phenomenal book called The Case for Islamo-Christian Civilization. That actually these two have always worked in tandem, in partnership with each other. There is no such thing as East and West. No such thing as East versus West. There is one Christian and Islamic civilization that has always merged and better one another, and that is where we can actually start from. It's no ordinary scholar. Giant scholar of the West, historian. And if we can understand that actually that is the civilization, that there is an Abrahamic civilization, and there is only ever one religion of Allah, and it has only ever been multiple expressions of that religion of Allah, in accordance with time, space, and need, and then eventually the last prophet came kafatan linnas, to all of mankind, we can then explain that our civilization is one civilization, and it allows us to be able to truly understand our neighbors in a way which is befitting of one another. Inshallah, tomorrow we will pick this up and how to go into this deeper, and inshallah our series will come to its climax on the last night, which is the Wednesday night, and inshallah we will have talked about the entire decade that we want to lay out for us in the coming 10 years. Our example tonight comes from those who are the most beautiful representatives of the Prophet. And not only the most beautiful representatives of the Prophet, tonight the one who most looked like the Prophet, in deed and in personality. In the army of Hussein, salamullahi alayhi, was whom? Christians as well. What does that tell you? That that movement which saved Islam could not have been accomplished unless it included those from the Christian civilization as well. If that doesn't tell us enough of what we need to think about the way in which we approach our Christian brethren, I don't know what else to tell you. For the Imam himself said, I know not of companions better than you. Now, that individual who was the most beautiful representative of the Prophet, you can imagine what it must have been like for the ladies of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam when that individual had to walk out on the battlefield. Especially for Sayyida Zainab and Kulthum, who experienced what it was like to be with the Prophet himself. It must have felt like losing the Prophet all over again. You remember that narration that tells us that after the Prophet passed away from this world, Bilal al-Habashi refused to recite the adhan again. We are told that one day he returned back to the city of Medina. And he saw the house of Fatima al-Zahra smoldering from the attack and the burning of that door. He comes towards Fatima alayhi salam and offers her his condolences and apologies for not being there. Is there anything I can do for you, oh my lady? Is there anything I can do? I left because I felt that if my presence was here and my adhan was here, then it would be me endorsing those who stole the leadership from Ali ibn Abi Talib. So I left. And now I wasn't there to be able to defend you, O Lady of Light. Tell me, is there anything I can do in repentance of this? We are told that Sayyida Zahra alayhi salam responded by saying, recite the adhan for me one last time, for I wish to know what it was like at the time of my father. I wish to experience that one more time. We are told that Bilal says, but I have taken it as an oath upon myself to never recite the adhan again. She says, no, this is my request. When Fatima requests from you, you break that oath. We are told that he recites the adhan. He recites Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. The tears are streaming down the eyes of Fatima. We are told that when he reaches Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, Fatima collapses to the ground. I ask you, if that was the reaction of Fatima when she heard the adhan of Bilal, what was the reaction of Sayyida Zainab and Kulthum when they heard the adhan of Ali al-Akbar in the morning of the day of Ashura? Would they not have seen the one who most resembled the Prophet and then gone, Ya Rasulullah, Wa Muhammadah, come and see what is about to happen to our family members? We are told that Ali al-Akbar is the first of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam to enter into the battlefield. Our dhakirin tell us that with all of the other shuhada, they would come to Imam al-Hussein and say, allow me, allow me. And each time Hussein would refuse them from going. In this case, when Ali al-Akbar came, he was told, go into the battlefield. And it was no less than his mother, Layla, that said, enter into the battlefield. We are told by our dhakirin that when Ali al-Akbar came for that permission, Hussein said, ask your mother for permission. Akbar responded by saying, but my mother Layla has told me to go. What do you mean, ask my mother for permission? He said, no, I'm not talking about your mother Layla. Your auntie Zainab has always looked after you. Go and ask Zainab for permission as well. Can you imagine the scene when Akbar has to enter into the tent and say his farewell to Zainab and Kulthum? He enters into the battlefield. We are told that he enters and he fights like a lion, killing many of the enemies. But we are also told that it is his mother and father that are standing on the edge of the tents. We are told at this moment, it is the mother that makes a dua and says, oh Allah, you are the one who returned Yusuf back to Yaqub. Return my Yusuf back to me, for I wish to be able to see my son one more time. Akbar, we are told, returns back towards the tents. We are told that he embraces his father. He says, Father, the thirst is killing me. I don't have the strength. I am going to take off my armor. This would be the reason as to why he is going to be struck the way in which he is struck. But he says, Father, there is so much thirst in my throat. Is there a drop of water that you can give to me? Our dhakirin tell us that Imam al-Hussein extends his tongue and says, if there is any moisture from my tongue, take it from me. We are told that Akbar says, Father, your tongue is drier than mine. How am I able to take anything from you at this moment? At this moment, Akbar ascends back onto his horse one last time. The ladies come out to take one last glance of Akbar before he is returned back to the tent with a spear in him. At this moment, we are told that Akbar, he begins to move slowly into the battlefield. He turns round and he sees his father following him every step of the way. He says, "Oh father, why do you follow me into the battlefield?" We are told that Hussein responds and says, "Oh Akbar, if you had a son like mine, if you had a son like my Akbar, you would not ask this question. I wish to be able to see you for as long as I can." Hussein returns towards the edge of the tents. We are told that the mother of Akbar is looking towards the face of Abu Abdullah, and she is able to know what is happening to her son on the battlefield based on the face and the reaction of Hussein. When Hussein is smiling, she knows her son is killing the enemy. But when Hussein has fear in his eyes, this is because Akbar is being surrounded by the enemies. There is one man in the Maqtal by the name of Abi Murrah. It is said that he takes an oath. He says, "I will strike down this boy in such a way that it will make Hussein weep." They turned to him and said, "What do you have with this young man? What quarrel do you have with him? Leave him alone." He says, "No, by Allah, I will make Hussein cry over his son." It is said that he begins to sneak and hide behind a tree. He has with him a spear. Akbar is fighting so bravely, but remember, Akbar has taken off his chainmail. He has taken off everything that is heavy for him, and so now his chest is exposed to every single blade, every single arrow. This evil man is hiding behind a tree. As Akbar is fighting and coming, eventually this man sneaks to the side of him. It is said that now he pulls back this blade and he thrusts it into the chest of Ali ibn al-Akbar. The spearhead enters into the chest. The narration says that he comes and takes the end of the spear and lifts Akbar into the air and throws him towards the ground. At this moment, Akbar says, "Oh my father, alaykum minni salam, accept my final salutation." It is said that all of the other martyrs would call out, "Aghithni, come to my aid." Akbar did not call out this because he did not want his father to see what he has suffered. We are told at this moment, Hussein falls to the ground. He says, "I cannot see. The pain is so much. I have lost my sight." Akbar, "Call for me. Your father will come to you." Hussein comes crawling towards Akbar. What does he see? He sees his son, his chest split open. We are told that Akbar is trying to hide the wound from him. Hussein gently lifts his hand and he sees the spearhead embedded into his chest. I ask you, how small is the chest of an 18-year-old man, and how lengthy is the spearhead on that spear that is embedded into him? We are told, our Dhakirin tell us that at this moment he looks towards Najaf and says, "Oh my father Ali, you are the one that lifted the gates of Khaybar, but you have never had to lift a spear from your own son's chest." Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam takes the spear, he pulls it out, the blood gushes all over the face of Abu Abdullah. We have a narration that says he takes this blood, he throws it to the sky, and not a single drop returns back. This is Allah's way of saying that I have accepted the sacrifice of Ali ibn al-Akbar. Hussein takes the body of Akbar back towards the tents. The women and the children come out. They see their brother. They see their son. They see their nephew. Wa Akbar, what happened to you, our dearest Akbar? We are told that Imam takes the body of Akbar back into the tent. He places his hand on the body of Akbar. When he brings back the body of Qasim, he places his hand on the chest of Qasim. He raises his head. He says, "Oh Allah, bear witness. They have taken away the sons of Imam al-Hussein on this day." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Matim Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
अकबर की शहे वाला उठाए कैसे लाश अकबर की शहे वाला उठाए जख्म शबीर भला दिल के दिखाए